they're brave, they're not bold to ride the unrideable road, to love branches from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star. Don't matter how hopeless, don't matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march in hell for an heavenly cause. And I know if I only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I lay to my rest. And the world will be better for peace, that one man stood and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable
Einstein. 1,000 times a day, I remind myself that my material and spiritual life depend on the fatigue of other men, living and dead, and that I must work to give in equal measure that which I have received and continue to receive. Albert Einstein. The province of Ontario in Canada asked Dr. Manger to make a study of the efficacy of chiropractic simply because there was a financial crisis in the government of Ontario. The expenses of the medical health care program were much too high, and the results were not good enough to give satisfaction to the public. So a commission was set up to study possible advantages of chiropractic using a group of economic researchers. They analyzed all the available clinical studies, statistics, and other pertinent data, and concluded that there was, quote, an overwhelming body of evidence that chiropractic within its realm, which is that of the biomechanical approach to the body, was superior and was much more therapeutically effective, cost-efficient, safer, more scientifically based, and had a much higher level of patient satisfaction than medical care.
Più scientificamente fondato e che aveva un livello di soddisfazione dei pazienti molto più alto di cura medica. Questo studio che è stato pubblicato in
The study, released in August of 1993, cautioned the Ontario government against many of the, quote, untested, questionable, or harmful medical treatments, end quote, and urged that the government encourage and prefer chiropractic care over medical care for low back pain. It further recommended that chiropractors be retained by all hospitals to act as gatekeepers who would direct the care of patients with back problems in hospitals. Now I see clearly. Alfio Port and I met several years ago when he was threatened by a number of cervical hernias, for which surgery had been suggested. I asked him to come not only because he managed to solve those problems and to go on with his life, but above all because he has really understood the spirit of chiropractic. This spirit holds that all of us have a mission, talent, and destiny, and that it is our job here to free you from those obstacles so that you can get on with your lives and take charge of them. That's exactly what he did, and that's why we stayed friends after our work. Anyway, let's hear from him how it went.
I met Dr. Rodberg a couple of years ago in a difficult moment for me. Not only because I was physically unwell, but also because I had family problems. And all of this contributed to create a patient who was physically and psychologically unwell.
Di un paziente appunto che stava male fisicamente e psicologicamente. Come normalmente accade in questi casi, per caso sono capitato.
Then, as often happens in these situations, I happened to find myself in the hands of Dr. Rodberg, in this case through a patient of mine who saw me wearing an orthopedic collar in my office and asked me if I wanted to meet Dr. Rodberg. So, not really knowing what to do, I called Paul one evening.
Ricordo che ero già stato a Verona dal professor, adesso non ricordo il nome, comunque un luminare, spesso si vede in televisione.
I had already been to Verona to see a very well-known specialist. I can't remember his name offhand, but he's often been on TV. And he had told me that I needed to have an operation to sort out these hernias. I had 3 or 4 hernias in the upper part of the vertebral column. When I got back to Catania, I was not really convinced, so I went to see several other neurosurgeons, and in the end it seemed I had no choice but to have this operation, at least to try and reduce the pain, if nothing else. I remember I had also had an NMR scan, and there seemed to be nothing to do but to have the operation. I met Dr. Rodberg, and I decided to put my trust in him. Sometimes in life you have to abandon rational behavior and trust to instinct. In any case, I had nothing to lose. I began the treatment, which at first struck me as very strange. But the fact was that in the first month I stopped needing to wear the orthopedic collar, and I had resumed all my old activities. And I'm now completely well again. It's not that the hernias have disappeared. They're still there. But I have no pain, no discomfort. So we're not talking about a real miracle, just about the application of chiropractic principles, which Dr. Rodberg will explain much better than I could. But the miracle, in inverted commas, has nevertheless taken place.
Il miracolo, fra virgolette, si è verificato. Ma un'altra cosa importante che mi preme sottolineare è che da allora, curando il corpo, contemporaneamente ho sentito di curare anche la mente. Perché curare la mente? Perché
I think it's important to add that since then, by taking care of my body, I feel I've been taking care of my mind too. And I've found that I'm convinced that when we really want something, when we really decide that we want to be well, because it's important to take a conscious decision to be well, then everything that happens afterwards is almost automatic. It's almost 3 years now since I started the treatment, and my life has totally changed. Not only physically, this is what I want to stress, but also psychologically. I am more in command of myself, and I know that without having to go outside, my body can look after itself. It's been amply shown. And I have to say thank you to Dr. Paul Rodberg. And also, I have to add that I've spent a lot less money than I would have done with official medicine. A lot less. I've got nothing against official medicine. Obviously, in extreme cases, we need to use it. But personally, I found a solution here.
I think it's useful to add that Alfio Porto is so well because he's an honest man and he tried to understand what was wrong inside himself. I've seen a lot of people in the last 20 years, but few who are so honest with themselves. And that's all we ask. Okay? Thank you for coming. And by the way, let me just say that when I was unhappy last year with personal problems, he was the one who helped me and encouraged me. And that's really nice. I really like it when I can see what I sow grow well. He's an excellent example of what chiropractic would like to achieve in society. Homework. Number 1, don't eat butter or oil that has been fried or heated. Number 2, fruit should only be eaten on an empty stomach. Number 3, proteins and carbohydrates should always be separated. Number 4, if you do not feel well in any way, don't eat proteins until later. Number 5, don't eat when you are angry, tired, or unhappy. Number 6, don't eat immediately before sleeping. Number 7, drink 4 liters of water per day, or weight approximately 1 liter for every 15 kilos or 30 pounds on an empty stomach or 3 hours after the main meals, adding between 30 and 100 grams of honey per liter, and if you like, lemon juice. This is not for diabetics. Number 8, keep wrapped ice packs on the abdomen to the right and left of the navel for 6 to 24 hours a day. Not if you're pregnant. Ice packs must be so well wrapped that no cold is felt. Number 9, decongesting massage with weights from 1/2 hour to 2 hours a day. Professional formation. How did that tree get so big without medicine? What is illness then? In English, we talk about dis-ease, or the lack of ease. When something is not easy, it's because the neurophysiological, phylogenetic hierarchy, the way of life that is developed over billions of years, has been momentarily compromised and therefore interrupted. Let's talk for a moment about what it is that causes this interruption. Too much exhaustion, which is not compensated for. Too many problems. We could call them life's little lessons, which are not studied and learned with friends or by a philosophical attitude or prayer or maturity. Intoxication is something we're going to be talking about a lot, because people have a frighteningly high level of intoxication. People worry about how clean their cars are, about their clothes, their hairstyles, all sorts of material things, and all the while there's a constant source of fermentation and putrefaction within the body itself. This puts the body on the wrong track. It could be a lack of exercise. 100 years ago, there was certainly no need to go to the gym. You had to work hard just to survive. Now, with cars, conveniences, elevators, buses, airplanes, and all the rest, there are very few people who keep their bodies fit enough to carry their own weight. These problems mean that our lives don't add up in the end. The body is overloaded, and in this overloaded state, it starts to consume the reserves, if there ever were any. The body has a lot of reserves, in the liver, in the muscles, and in the blood. But each time we dig into that reserve without giving back what we've taken, what used to be regenerative becomes degenerative. Patients are afraid of this word degenerative. It sounds like a death sentence to them. Usually it's the body which is angry with the patient, who, through stupidity, ignorance, the wrong ideas, or a complete lack of hygienic information, does not look after the riches of his or her biological history. And the body gives its own reply. The worst therapeutic approach is to silence those justified screams of protest that the body makes, instead of satisfying its basic needs, and thereby creating physiological debts. This is what illness is. Next time I'll talk to you about a friend whose disappeared menstrual cycle returned after 3 years. My first patient, myself. Back to my experience as a patient. I'm going to tell you about when I started chiropractic school in September of 1976. When spring arrived, after having had my spinal vertebra adjusted for 3 months by my student doctor Frank Sabatino, who, as I told you, after a lifetime of intoxication and putrefaction and medicines and internal imbalance and so on, connected my body with my brain with biomechanical efficiency for the first time in my life. As he went on, he reinforced the sequences that my body was born for, to live a balanced, harmonious life. Frank had taught me, using the principles of Herbert Shelton, to combine clean, biologically pure foods, so that month by month I got rid of a lot of backed-up poisons. He taught me to fast, too, which cleaned my body thoroughly while I was studying 12 hours a day. Well, when spring finally arrived, I found I didn't suffer from allergies anymore. I didn't know what to think. I had had allergies since the age of 5, a different one for each change of the season. Allergy, colds, pneumonia, an allergy to this, to that. Now my breathing was perfect, and I couldn't believe it. And while I was happy, I was also very angry, because for all those years, I and my brother, who was in the same boat, and my parents, who paid for all this treatment and watched us suffer, had been lied to and cheated. It was very painful to think that we had swallowed such a big lie, that my own parents could be tricked like this. If I hadn't been in another part of the world, I would have gone and knocked at their door and would have had something to say to these allergists. With the maturity that I've got now, I would have taken them straight to court for criminal actions. And so for the first time since I was 5 years old, I could breathe properly and easily, simply because the level of neurophysiological, respiratory, assimilative, and eliminative efficiency had all returned to normal. Something I would never have imagined possible, and there it was. Next time, I'll tell you how it came back, and what I did to make sure that it never came back again for the rest of my life. Now I see clearly. Chiropractic is art, philosophy, and science. And as a foreigner here, I've always felt more at home with artists and philosophical people. This, of course, is the presentation of Graziella Parlegreco, who is a friend and a painter. And we'll see some of her work later on, so that you can judge for yourselves that she is not only someone who knows how to choose her doctor or her friends, but that she's somebody with a very special sensitivity. I'd like to say one thing right away. She's one of the very few patients who is ready to evaluate and criticize me if I'm not balanced, positive, and supportive when we begin our work. She tells me to keep my negativity away from her, and I appreciate this sensitivity. It's always nice to work with her, so I've asked her to talk to us about the message behind the art, science, and philosophy of chiropractic. Welcome.
Benvenuta. Ben trovato. Grazie per avermi chiamata.
Piacere mio, lo so che la padronanza dell'italiano non ti manca, quindi le idee le puoi mettere in poco tempo.
Sì, tu hai mantenuto il tuo accento perfettamente straniero, però ti fai capire sempre di più.
Spero.
Cosa dire? Sono venuta
Puoi parlare
volentieri
della tua
perché...
esperienza?
Sì. Stavo ripensando a quando ti ho conosciuto.
Thank you. I know you don't have any problem speaking Italian, so you can express your ideas freely.
You still have a perfect American accent, but you're getting better at expressing yourself.
I certainly hope so.
Well, let's see. I was thinking about when I first met you, 17 years ago. We had had the first meeting, and I had started to drink all that water you make us drink, which is essential for detoxifying the organism. I had gradually started to abandon medicines, trying to use a preventive strategy. 2 years later, I was badly in need of help. I suppose I didn't do the right things, or enough in any case. I had to have an operation, and in that situation, when you are about to have an operation, you can't really say to your doctor, no, I don't want any antibiotics, I don't want painkillers.
They're indispensable with surgery.
Of course, but this medicine had caused an intestinal blockage after the operation. The surgeon said that everything was okay from a technical point of view. So the first person I thought of to solve this problem was you. You started out with adjustment and lymphatic drainage. You reminded me of everything I had to do. Ice on the abdomen, water as soon as I could, and a diet. Rice, whole wheat pasta, vegetables. Only cooked vegetables at first. I remember that people used to say, "What are you doing? You've just had an operation. You are anemic. You need to eat meat." But I held out, and only 2 months later I had a new exhibition with 12 new paintings. I had produced them after the operation, while suffering from that tremendous problem on a detoxifying diet, and I was looking fantastically slim. I have to say that I was very satisfied, and I continued to come back to you, and I still do, when I have some little problem, and advise my closest friends to do the same. I imagine the philosophy that you are talking about is a holistic philosophy, which sees man as an integral part of the universe, and who needs, first of all, to find in the microcosm around him the right way to be, think, and act.
Graziella is very sensitive to something that happened to me when I was a student, and that's the realization that the chiropractor should not be necessary, just as the healthcare system is almost always not necessary. Our love for yoga and meditation, which have an enormous potential in combination with chiropractic, keeps us on the right track. Well, I'm happy that you could come today and add your voice to this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Professional formation. How did that tree get so big without medicine? I prepared the Italian Olympic wrestling team for the 1992 Olympic Games. It was an honor to be trusted to work with people who are so highly specialized in their own fields. Please don't misunderstand me. If you're a patient and you're not an Olympic athlete, the relationship and the responsibility are the same. And it's still an honor to have gained your trust and to work with you. Athletes have a myth of invulnerability, which is false. They believe that they can eat enormous quantities of all sorts of foods without doing themselves any harm. The real truth is that their metabolic efficiency is so high that the quantities of foods that they can digest are surprising. But the mistake that a lot of athletes make is eating fruit after meals, which creates a kind of short circuit in their systems, especially digestive, respiratory, and circulatory initially, and then their motors or muscles don't give the kind of performance, the kind of efficiency that is expected. Putting proteins and carbohydrates together causes problems of the same type. The only way I could explain to athletes that their diet made a big difference was to explain to them their performance as if we were talking about a Formula One racing car. A Formula One car, which has 4 bolts loose, when it goes around the track at 50 miles an hour, well, those loose bolts don't make much difference. But when the car is going at 100 or 150 miles per hour, the same problem will mean certain death. And so I showed the athletes with muscle testing that they were creating their own weaknesses with physio-illogical eating behavior. As soon as we got over this idea of their invincibility, their invulnerability, we started to understand each other, and their performance improved very greatly, made them very happy, and their recovery times after injury were much less even than those predicted by the official sports medical staff in Rome.
Thank you.